You know, I think that this is a very key factor in balanced, reflective leaders, if they have the skill set to be able to do this. But I think that one of the things that we need to talk and maybe dwell on for a few moments is the fact that truth is based upon your experiences, the things that you've been exposed to, the things that you may have read, you may have heard. So therefore, and age, I think cultural differences from one age to another also impact that. So what may be a perceived truth for me may not be exactly defined as that truth for you.
That's right. That's right. And that's a very big deal, especially when you think about things like leadership. You know, we're talking about this concept called solipsism, and it's a philosophical term. A person can look at something as a solipsist, which basically, I'm going to read a couple of different definitions, and basically within the context of leadership, some individuals choose to restrict engagement with others that could potentially call to question the perspective of the leader. And in other words, the leader surrounds herself or himself with people who do nothing but affirm their own viewpoints. And while A is occurring in the organization, the universe within which the leader chooses to reside prefers to embrace B as reality. So solipsism is the idea of a self-construed universe, or a self-construed or a self-referential world. And the best example of that I could think of today was, as we were talking, was the idea of the emperor's new clothes. Mm-hmm. That emperor was a solipsist. He created a world around him that affirmed his insecurities, that affirmed the world that he wanted to live in. Miller, who is a philosopher, he says that solipsism is the belief in one reality, the solipsist himself upon whose thoughts and perceptions all other things depend for their existence. It's a very heightened view of oneself in relationship to everything else.
And therefore, under those circumstances, you can see what is one truth to one person, but another truth to the leader. And the leader then works from her or his view of truth, and therefore creating a reality that may or may not be consistent with what really may be going on. And I think that we're in real trouble with that right now from an organizational standpoint, and I don't think we want to get into debating the politics that are present in America today. But those truths, those views, are so diametrically opposed right now from what we would call, you know, the left and the right, and squeezing in the middle, and so searching for those truths have so many variables that impact it that none of us, I don't think very few of us, are going to have the same view about truth, especially within the concept of the political realm, and spiritual religious realm too.
I came across this quote from one of Margaret Wheatley's books, and I know that you know her, and she cites the work of Maturana and Varela, and they were doing work on the idea of human cognition, and this is what she found out. She said that they explained that at any moment what we see is most influenced by who we have decided to be. Our eyes do not simply pick up information from an outside world and relay it to our brains. Information relayed from the outside through the eye accounts for only 20% of what we use to create a perception. At least 80% of the information that the brain works with is information already in the brain.
Yeah, already there.
We each create our own worlds by what we choose to notice, creating a world of distinctions that make sense to us. We then see the world through this self we have created. Information from the external world is a minor influence. We connect with who we are with selected amounts of new information to enact our own particular version of reality.
Amen. Amen. I'm sitting here thinking as you were reading that, Tony, and it's something that you and I have had years of dialogue and discussion. But I go back to a very, very simple example of that, so that maybe our listeners can put it in what I would call very simplistic terms. I was married to a wonderful woman for over 35 years, and I lost her a few years ago to breast cancer. And we had a great life. Loved each other deeply, had two wonderful sons. And when they were growing up, we would go to football games. And in some of those games, our youngest son played, and the rest of the games were either Marshall or WVU or local high school games. And Barbara always went. And but when she went to the game, she saw things that no one else that we may have been with saw. And so after the game was over, especially those games in which our team won, she understood winning and losing. But we would then have discussions about what we observed. And very, very seldom did her worldview, her truth for that evening or that morning or that day, centered on the play of the players, the coaching of the coach, the atmosphere. It was all about the people that were. She watched the people, and she was able to see color, distinction, gender, and actions in a way that once we were removed from that particular setting, the description of what she saw was so. If you had a paintbrush, you could paint it. Well, I didn't see any of that, or seldom saw very little of that. And so what happens is that when we look at the world, no matter from what perspective, even at the same moment in the same location, but just 2 or 4 or 12 different individuals, we're going to be influenced, one, by the fact that 80% of what we know is already in your head before you even got to that point of observation or discussion. And then the rest of it's influenced by this whole concept of what we perceive as to be reality and truth and meaning.
And I think the impetus behind not only this article but our conversation today is based upon a lot of abuse that we've seen in organizations. And I think that they are educational organizations, they may be corporate organizations, they may be local organizations, they may be ones that we've read about, in New York City. I mean, it's a problem that perpetuates our society. And I think that this idea of solipsism, of constructing a universe that is comfortable for us, but maybe very, very far removed from what is truly happening, is the cause of a lot of reasons why consultants come in to an organization. Think about how many times, we may have been in an organization where we do a stakeholder analysis, where we talk with internal constituents within the organization, and maybe we even talk with people that are maybe consumers of a product or service. But then when we talk to the leader or the leaders of the organization, they see things completely differently.
Yes.
And there's this disconnect. Where is this disconnect coming from? And why is it there? I think that when we think about qualities that are important for a promising leader, for an effective leader, we must consider the fact that our truth, as a leader, is certainly colored, is shaped, is influenced by our life experiences, by both our securities and our insecurities, by what we've learned, by our gender, by the generation in which we were born, by our place of geographical origin. All of this baggage, all of this stuff shapes who we are and how we see the world. And then when you add to that the layers of injury or insult, of pain, of circumstances in life that may not have been necessarily good, or a lack of desire to confront certain things, then it really gets messy and complex, which is what we're going to talk about the rest of the time today.